Thanks for joining us on another episode of Tea and Trowels, the series from the Florida Public Archaeology Network, where we chat with archaeologists about their work and what archaeology means to them. I'm one of your hosts, Emily Jane Murray, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Allyson Ropp, an underwater archaeologist from North Carolina. Hi, Allyson. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Do you want to say anything else about yourself and then tell us about the mug that you brought?
As Emily Jane said, I am an archaeologist that works underwater. Currently in North Carolina. Just finished up a grant project with East Carolina University, and now moving on to work with the state on some of their projects as well. So I am not a coffee or tea drinker, but I still brought a mug. And surprise, surprise, there's a mermaid on it. This one says, "I must be a mermaid. I have no fear of depth and a great fear of shallow living." So always inspirational when I drink out of it, and it comes with a reusable straw. So
very nice.
Go world.
I was gonna say, I almost brought a mermaid mug in your honor, but instead I opted for my HMS Florida mug because you used to live here in Florida in St. Augustine, and the last project we worked on together was doing some state monitoring with field school students. So
I did, and I do miss working with you all. There is no organization like that here in North Carolina, so you guys were a lot of fun, and if I drank coffee, I would definitely use an HMS mug.
We'll find some ways to smuggle us up or smuggle you back down. We'll
yeah. I do occasionally wear my HMS buff thing.
Nice.
So,
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's get started with our questions. So why did you want to be an archaeologist?
So that's kind of a twofold thing. Growing up here in North Carolina, my parents are both chemists. So hardcore science was never my thing, especially growing up around a dinner table where they talked about different sorts of chemical bonds and drugs. And I was just like, this doesn't make sense to me. So I fell in love with history and always had a desire to move. I'm not a very stationary person. And so I was going through school and I just kind of stumbled across archaeology and went to field school and fell in love with it and just wanted to keep pursuing it. And eventually decided, oh, hey, I should, learn to dive. I do like the water. As a Pisces, it's a great place to be in the water. And so I learned to dive, and it all just kind of fell into place into now doing underwater archaeology. On the other side of it, I grew up going to the Outer Banks, and at one point, I don't remember exactly when they opened this museum, but there's now on Hatteras Island a graveyard of the Atlantic Museum that is there to tell the stories of the shipwrecks of the graveyard of the Atlantic. And one of the posters in there was for I believe a Civil War era submarine called the USS Alligator that NOAA had, and I believe the Navy had looked for on and off for a number of years. And we were standing in the exhibit, and my dad was like, "You're gonna find that one day." And I'm like, What are you talking about, Dad? I'm gonna find what? There's nothing to find. It's probably gone. He's like, "No, you're going to find it one day." And then just kept walking. And I'm like, what? And I didn't put that together until I started actually getting into archaeology that he had said all of this. And I was like, oh, he was right. So partially have to thank my dad for dropping the seed in my head and not really knowing what it meant. When he said it, but yeah.
So have you found the submarine alligator yet?
I have not. I've never actually looked for it. It has never been something that piqued my interest, although I feel like it should.
You still have time. And now you're back in the area, so just go do some snorkel surveys.
Way offshore in the ocean. I think that's a great idea. I'll take on the sharks.
Well, if your research is not on this submarine, can you tell us a little bit about what you do study?
Yes. So my research was kind of uh been all over the place. So in graduate school, so I went to graduate school here at East Carolina University, and I looked at the pirate maritime cultural landscape of North Carolina, looking at what the history of these guys were, who came here, where did they go, how did they use the environment, and then compared that actual historical information to how the state remembers them, and if the correlation is actually accurate. Do we remember these people as they were? Do we remember them how we want them to be? And it's definitely the latter. But since then, I've done research in a number of different areas. I spent some time in Lake Champlain in Vermont, and was looking at a small wreck up there, trying to figure out what that was. As Emily Jane said, I spent some time in Florida, looking at a variety of different shipwrecks. And that's when I started to get into an interest into how climate change really affects the shipwrecks, which is where I see my research heading in the future. So hopefully if you do this again in like 2 to 3 years, I'll be in a PhD program exploring these questions of climate change and shipwrecks. So yeah.
So I do have to ask, people also really love pirates in Florida.
Of course.
Who actually had more pirates, Florida or North Carolina? Because I don't usually think North Carolina when I think pirates.
I would have to say Florida. North Carolina's history with pirates was very, very short term, and very last minute, and sort of that golden age of piracy, and was kind of like a last ditch effort to have a place to go before the Royal Navy really cracked down. Where Florida, much, much bigger, much closer to all of those shipping lanes that pirates like to haunt, much closer to the Bahamas where they had actually set up a camp, and then during that golden age of piracy, and then you move into like the beginning of the 1800s, and you've got all the piracy in the Gulf, which was also associated to some degree with Florida, and coming out of the Spanish islands and attacking American and British ships. So I think Florida, unfortunately, wins that battle.
I mean, but you guys do have Blackbeard's ship in North Carolina, which is pretty good bragging rights. Probably terrible archaeologist can't quite name too many pirate ships that we have in Florida. We have good stories in history, but
you do. As far as I know, you don't have any.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they're not there. They just haven't been found yet.
There we go.
And pirate ships, for the most part, look the same archaeologically as merchant ships and Navy ships. And so unless there's a large contingent of gold, like the widow with a nice bell that says your name on it, it's kind of hard to identify a pirate ship.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. What's your favorite tool in your toolkit?
A seamstress tape is absolutely my favorite thing in just life in general too, but especially for diving and taking really quick measurements. This baby, you can easily shove it in your wetsuit arm and just down like your top, wherever you can hold it so it doesn't fall out, and you can just pull out an end of it and just measure and then stuff it back in there. So this is one of my favorite tools.
Measuring is important to collect all that scientific data.
Mm-hmm.
So, very cool. Do you have a best worst field story that you can now laugh about?
Yeah. So my first field school was actually a terrestrial field school in Tuscany in Italy. Um, it was a great experience. I absolutely loved it. It was on top of a hill. Um, it was a medieval site on top of a Roman site on top of a Etruscan site. So went back well before the founding of Rome. And um, there were a couple wells on the site that they had hired contractors to come in and actually excavate for us. So we as students were then there to wash all the artifacts coming out of the well. And so they had closed this well with a bunch of bricks. And the summer I was there, they were pulling all of these bricks out. And they're like, okay, we're gonna wash all these bricks that are covered in mud and muddy water. And we were using muddy water to wash these muddy bricks. And it just was this super repetitive, ineffective method to figuring out what was on these bricks, if anything at all. And most of them didn't have anything unique on them. Like there were no finger swipes, there were no markings. So they just went into a pile in the dirt. And it was just like, well, why did we just go through all of this effort to wash these bricks that are muddy with muddy water? We're just gonna put them back in the dirt in a hole in the ground and cover them up. But it was sad and really frustrating and really hot.
Did you find any bricks that were exciting, or were they all just...
There were a few that had some finger swipes. I think a couple had some like markings on them. And then underneath all of those bricks was where the exciting stuff actually was. And so as it usually goes, on the last day of our project, they finally got down to the level of the Roman inhabitants in this well, and they started pulling stuff out. Like, well, this is our last day. Like, we were busy closing down the rest of the site. They were pulling out gold coins and spoons, and like you could see the Roman emperor on the coin. And I was like, dang, I could only come next year. But
I think that's like the perfect encapsulation of archaeology too. It's like you do repetitive things that seem silly, and then you find the good stuff on the last day when you never have enough time to actually look at it.
yeah. But the site overall was really cool. So it was a good experience. It did push me to then learn how to dive and wanted to do underwater stuff, because washing those bricks in the hot sun with muddy water just almost tanked it for me.
It's funny, as a terrestrial archaeologist, I'm like, I would rather wash those muddy bricks in the sun. Like, but then you got to figure out how to breathe and stay stationary while you're working.
It's true. It's true. You're right. Diving's not that easy. There are a whole lot of challenges.
Depends on what you're into, right?
Yeah. You're not wrong.
Well, we have one more big question for you. How do you think archaeology can help save the world?
Whew, that is a big question. I think archaeology has a lot of potential for helping the world. From a artifact point of view, you're looking at what people used over time, and you can kind of break down those differences between cultures by saying, well, they used the same thing we did, or they did something the same way we did. We're really not that different when you look at people's stuff. We all like stuff. You have a show about mugs. Everybody's got some sort of mug in some sort of form. So I think archaeology can really open those boundaries that we put up between ourselves and others, and kind of cross those things, that boundary, to make and hopefully make a better world. And with climate change, you know, people have been responding to sea level rise or sea level withdrawal for over our past continuously, and have had to react in various different ways. And there's probably stuff out there that we can find to help us understand how we could potentially respond in the future. Obviously, we have different technology, but the problem to some degree is still the same. And especially on islands that are ebbing and flowing in their size based on different weather patterns, how did those communities respond could be a way that we, living on the coast, you in St. Augustine, can respond to growing and rebuilding land or reclaiming land by wrecking boats and building stuff on top of them, or planting more mangroves, whatever it may be. I think archaeology can help answer some of those questions to understand what we could potentially do in moving forward to combat this world problem.
It's always interesting to hang out with environmental scientists too, because I think, even just understanding how things changed in the past is really important, and to see, there's so much environmental data that we can find at these archaeological sites too that can help us kind of figure out, cause and effect, like, oh, if this happened here and here's the environmental shift and how did people respond. So
yeah,
so much to learn.
I know. I think that's my favorite part about archaeology, is you learn something new every day, whether you're in the field or staring at a computer or reading a book or staring at a tiny little piece of grain. Like, you're learning something that somebody really didn't know before. So
very cool. So we do have a bonus question with all of the craziness going on in the world. What's been keeping you sane lately?
Oh, man. Well, I can show you because I just finished it. It took me 6 months. I'm gonna have to lift up the computer. Was actually my sanity.
How many pieces?
It's 5,000 pieces.
Wow.
I'm only missing 2. I don't know where they went. It's about 5 feet long, and it is the painting on the roof or the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. So I got it for my birthday, started it back in March, finished it last week, so about 6 months.
Man.
What I'm gonna do now, I don't know. Probably watch baking shows. Maybe refurbish some furniture.
There you go. And I would say 2 out of 5,000 is not bad. I had a friend who had a 3,000 piece puzzle and she was missing like 27, and she thought it was her who lost them. And then she found 2 pieces that were like literally the same piece. And she's like, oh, it's not me. It's this puzzle. So
yeah, it's very possible that they didn't put the pieces in there. It's also, as you could tell, was put together on cardboard boxes because I didn't have a table big enough. So it could be in the cardboard boxes. It could be under my rug. I did look in my couch and under the couch, and they're not there. They could have gotten vacuumed. The ghosts could have stolen them.
well, one day, hopefully you will find them.
Hopefully.
Well, thanks for joining us, and thanks to everyone watching along at home. Cheers.
Of course. Cheers. It's been fun.